Good evening, explorers! I'm Explorer Torie, and welcome to another presentation of Native Nevada Nature. If you're new to this is a weekly series that highlights one plant or one animal species. It's a great opportunity to learn about some nature from the own comfort of your home that all ages can enjoy, watch, and learn. So I hope you enjoy it. But of course, as if you've watched any Native Nevada Nature, I'm always encouraging action, how to help out the community, conservation efforts that are around and already active. So here's your chance, explorers, to make a difference because we have an issue that's coming up right now. So we have to protect the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. So if you're not familiar with what that is, it is the largest wildlife refuge in the lower 48 states. So Alaska down, it is the largest wildlife refuge. It houses many protected endangered species. We are allowed to do recreational activities in it. And on July 1st, the House Armed Services Committee voted to strip 850,000 acres of the Desert National Wildlife Refuge and give it to the Air Force. This was a last-minute amendment that was passed without fully understanding the repercussions and without discussing any of Nevada's delegation or stakeholders. This is catastrophic. We cannot let them take over and get rid of the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, pretty much splitting it in half. We want to protect our environment, protect our lands, protect it for Nevadans. And so we're saying don't bomb the bighorn. I even have my Don't Bomb the Bighorn sheep shirt on instead of my normal field gear because I think this is an action that we definitely need to show. Nevadans are against this. We need to tell our congressman or congresswoman about how we want to oppose this. So please use hashtag Don't Bomb the Bighorn during this presentation. Please share that out on your Facebook feeds. And there's also going to be a petition posted at the start of this video. So look for it in the comments section. It'll only take a second to sign yourself on the petition and show your support on protecting the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. I'm going to remind you at the end of this presentation to do this exact same thing, but it's good to do it while you're presenting, while you're listening to today's presentation. So with that being said, something that you can find pretty readily in the Desert National Wildlife Refuge is our plant that we're going to be talking about today. It is the creosote bush. Creosote, pronouncing creosote, bush, also known as greasewood. In the medicinal herb, or in medicinal terms, it's called chaparral. In Mexico, it's known as gobernadora, which means governess in Spanish, due to its ability to secure more water than nearby plants. And in the Sonora, it's known commonly as ediodilia. But I will call it creosote. That's what I know about it in the field, but you might hear it with any of those terms. The genus and species is Laria tridentata. Tridentata has the same species name as our sagebrush, which refers to three-toothed leaves. And the genus Laria actually honors Bishop Juan Antonio Hernandez Perez de Laria, who is the patron of science. All 5 species of the Laria genus are all native to the Americas. You can probably hopefully see it in this video playing. You've probably seen creosote. It's a very common plant here in the Mojave Desert. It's kind of those bushes that you kind of miss. It's very flimsy. It's kind of low to the ground. So you may not be familiar with it. So let me teach you how to identify it. So Laria tridentata, or creosote, is an evergreen shrub. It grows about 3 to 9 feet, 10 feet, nothing really bigger than that. They are known for having thin, flimsy branches. You can pretty much just move one out of the way if it's in the way. The stems bear resinous, dark green leaves they have 2 opposite leaflets joined at the base. So you can kind of see that in the picture, in the top right picture. 2 leaflets that look kind of like they're joined together. Sometimes you'll see galls on the plant formed by a gall midge. But other than that, they have flowers, yellow flowers with 5 petals. And their seeds are kind of like white, puffy, fluffy things. So you can see that in the bottom picture. That's pretty much the characteristic of creosote. There'll be green leaves on flimsy, small branches with puffy white seeds and yellow flowers. They're pretty drought tolerant. The leaflets, they have a rhizin on them that pretty much keep the water in. But they're pretty commonplace out here. Here's a zoom in picture of the flowers and the seeds, those yellow, bright 5-petal flowers and the puffy little seeds. This is the range of the creosote. So you can find them in all the southwestern deserts, up into the southwestern United States and down into Mexico. It's pretty common. It's actually the most common plant in the Mojave Desert. So pretty much everywhere you go, you'll probably seen or you've already seen this little guy, this little bush. So the habitat that it resides in, it's funny because creosote itself is known as its own habitat. It's a creosote bush or brush shrubland, which means that it's very common, and it's not unusual to see stands of these. You'll see creosote dominating the entire area and most likely be the only bush or shrub around. They tend to display evenly spaced distribution of plants. It was assumed that the plant produced a water-soluble inhibitor that prevented the growth of other bushes near it. However, science has now shown that the root system of the creosote bush is just so great, so efficient at absorbing water that other fallen seeds nearby cannot germinate. They cannot grow because there's not enough water for them. They effectively create a dead zone around every plant. So the creosote bush has a large taproot that digs down into the soil, spreads out. It can go deep as 30 inches. Only thing stopping it is caliche, or really hard rock. But other than that, it can just bring out its roots and grab as much water as it needs. It could bring other waters to other plants nearby, but it's just so efficient at getting water that most of the time it's the only bush around. You can commonly see it grown on slopes, valley floors, sand dunes, arroyos, so many different types of habitats. You can find it up to elevations up to 5,000 feet. After that, it starts getting juniper woodland area, but everywhere below in the Sonoran, the Mojave, and the Chihuahuan deserts, this will probably be the only plant that you see. Well, not the only plant, because in this example, there seems to be a relationship between the creosote and what's called a burrow bush or the white burr sage, Ambrosia dumosa. If you can see in this picture right here, you can see the clumps of green next to clumps of white. The green are the creosote and the white are the white burr sage. And a lot of times you will find these two together in the same environment. They say that the creosote white burr sage association covers approximately 70% of the Mojave Desert. That means that your chances of seeing these two plants anywhere in the Mojave Desert is pretty high. They hypothesize that the creosote bush uses white burr sage as a nurse plant. The creosote will grow under the burr sage, using it as cover, protection against the heat. And of course, the creosote is really good at retrieving water, so I bet the white burr sage uses that to its advantage as well. Though the relationship between the two and why they occur together is still a mystery and still being tested today. But you'll find them pretty readily out here in the desert. But let's talk about the lifestyle of a creosote bush. What is it like to be a creosote in today's day and age? Well, first off, creosote bush requires summer rains for successful sexual reproduction. They say that the flowering success of a creosote is greatest with moderate rainfall. If there's too much rainfall, they will actually do the opposite and get diseased. So nice flowing rainfall in the summer. The monsoon rains are usually good. The seeds are primarily adapted for tumbling rather than animal dispersal or lofting. There will be animals that will eat the seeds, but most of them are because they're fluffy, they're meant for flying away and tumbling on the ground. They say that the way that the seed is shaped, it's so well adapted that it only needs a little bit of wind to be able to send the seeds tumbling. But because we already talked about the creosote bush, its greatest weapon is grabbing all that water, creating a dead zone around their areas. A lot of times they're in sandy soils, and it's believed that historically the creosote in that area pretty much took away all the moisture in that area and made the soil sandy. So with that in mind, it may be pretty hard to be able to disperse your seeds, pollinate through flowering, and get seeds established nearby when there's no water for them to grow. Because of that, creosote does cloning. They reproduce by asexual reproduction as well. They're not the only plant that does this. There's plenty of others that participate with this, but creosote does it a lot and very plentiful. And they do it in a very special way. So a lot of times, let's just start off with one creosote bush. So there's one bush right here, and it's too costly to do any seeds or to do any flowering. So instead, they will branch under and then branch up and make a new plant. Now, over time, the branching underground may break or separate into two separate plants, but those two are genetically identical to each other. They're technically the exact same plant, and this cycle will continue. There'll be a plant that will branch under, emerge a new plant, branch under, emerge a new plant. And suddenly there'll be these rings, these colonies of creosote bush that are all the same single clonal copy. And so you'll see these wonderful rings out in the desert. Just like this one in the middle, the most famous one is called king clone, which is observed right here. It's a huge ring, a creosote ring of all the same genetically identical plant. It is estimated that king clone is to be 11,700 years old. It's crazy. It just keeps branching. There have been plants in the middle that have died off, but it makes this really clear ring, and they're all the same. And the picture doesn't even do it justice. This plant ring is about 67 feet long and 45 feet wide. It is enormous. King Clone is located in the Lucerne Valley and Johnsonville Valley in California, which is in the central Mojave Desert. You can go visit King Clone if you want to see how incredibly big this guy is. King Clone was identified by Frank Vassett. He was a professor at the University of California, Riverside. He used radiocarbon dating to figure out the age. And they say that creosote is known for being several thousand years old. They say the average age is anywhere between 600 and 1,000 or 1,200 years old. So they may not be as old as King Clone, but they can get pretty old as well. So this flimsy little plant that's everywhere, just think, how old is the one right next to my backyard? Now, even though creosote is kind of flimsy, when the heat comes out, the two petals that are right here will fold onto each other and fold on the stems to protect themselves from the heat. And because of that, they don't make very good cover for animal communities, but there are animals that will definitely use it as cover, because when it's the only plant located for miles, this might be your only cover you have. So creosote will provide good cover for small mammals, non-game birds. It might give some fair cover for pronghorn. After you start getting bigger, like a bighorn sheep doesn't do much for cover, but animals will use what they have. The flowers are great for pollinators. They help pollinate or help feed a lot of insects out here. There's actually a famous host insect that the creosote hosts. It's called the lac insect. It doesn't really have a name. It's mostly called by its genus species, which directly has Lariae in it to show you how closely associated they are with it. So the lac insect produces lac and deposits it on the creosote bush. A lot of times you will see this brown, black glob on the stems, and that's the lac. And lac is plastic when heated, but hardens again on cooling, forming a strong bond like a commercial sealing wax. And a lot of desert peoples traditionally use that to seal the lids on food jars. Which brings me to my next point about creosote food preservation. Preservation. So there's an antioxidant that's produced by the creosote. I would not even give it a try to pronounce the acid, but it's short for NDGA. So the NDGA acid is a powerful antioxidant that the creosote produces for protection. And when it was discovered in the 1930s, people would extract it and use it to keep food from spoiling. This practice was thoroughly used in the 50s, but in the 60s and 70s, it was actually banned because of the reports of toxicity. But it was heavily used as a food preservative and to preserve natural fibers. Now, that wasn't the only use for creosote. You think that a plant species that's heavily seen across the desert, it would have been used as much as it could. And they did. It's historically shown that many Native American groups utilize creosote for a number of different things. It's been heavily documented. There's Creosote Bush is described as nature's drugstore. It was used by indigenous people for treatment for at least 14 different afflictions, which include cold, chest infection, lung congestion, intestinal discomfort, stomach cramps, wounds, poison, swollen limbs, menstruation, constipation, nausea, body odor, postnasal drip. Pretty much, if you had an ailment, they tried to use creosote to solve it. Now, creosote in medicinal terms as a medicinal herb is called chaparral, has no relation to the chaparral region in California, that area. They just call chaparral the herb version of creosote. So chaparral is highly sought out, and you can actually buy it at a drugstore or like a Whole Foods type of place where you could buy herbs. Just because Native Americans used it for many ailments, and there is research currently going to see if it can help. They say that it may be helpful in treating malignant melanomas, so tumor and cancer research that's currently going on. But the FDA has warned against the use of creosote in heavy consumptions because they say that it actually has harmful liver and kidney damage when taken a very long time. So research is still going on its usefulness in the medical facility, but the Food and Drug Administration, Health Canada, Cancer Research, they all recommend you do not take chaparral to treat or prevent any type of cancer. And I'm not a doctor. I don't mean to give medical advice. Just historically, chaparral or the creosote was heavily used for different types of ailments and different types of diseases in indigenous culture. All right, let's look at the fossil record. Let's go way back, further than indigenous cultures. Let's see how long the creosote has been around. And actually, according to the fossil record, they haven't been around very long. You could think about other plants and animal species, insects that have been here for millions and millions of years. And compared to that, creosote is actually seen to be a fairly recent addition. They say that evidence shows it came anywhere between 40,000 and about 12,000 years ago. which, if you remember King Clone, he is 11,700 years old. So he's pretty much been here since the establishment of creosote, and that seems to be characteristic for a lot of the creosote out here. So genetic and fossil evidence indicates that the Mojave creosote was a relative newcomer in this desert. It's about 11 to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age. The area would have been dominated by juniper woodlands and lots of grass. As the climate became warmer and drier, the junipers stayed nearby the mountains where it was cooler, and a new plant evolved from the Sonoran Desert form, appeared on the scene, our lovely creosote. And the newcomer was so successful in the competition for scarce water that it soon became the largest and most conspicuous plant of our desert landscape. So it's interesting that this guy came out in the Pleistocene era just after the Ice Age and pretty much dominated the area. As things became drier and more towards the desert, the creosote became the top competitor in this area and soon became one of the only plants you'll see. This picture right here is a cross-section of the wood. You can see the 12 annual growth rings. Thought it was pretty cool. Definitely won't be able to show you how old King Clone is, which looks like it was at the beginning of the creosote start. Now, as always, we always look back on the past and see what our poor plant species has been through, but it's always important to look towards the future. And I say that in terms of the conservation status of the creosote. So the creosote bush, their current status is actually not assessed. It's never been assessed or processed on how populations are growing in the creosote bush and these shrublands. However, because of how plentiful they are seen in these deserts and these areas, it is mostly seen as them doing very successful, very well. They are not decreasing in numbers. They are prominent in the desert. There are some threats to our creosote bush. For instance, fire is always a threat to plant species. Creosote can actually only take low severity fires. Because of the resin on the plant, it is actually very flammable, and they will catch up in flames with more intense fires, and they can't recover. They don't sprout very well after the fire, and with no water around and there nothing else to promote other species from growing, they pretty much die. They do say though that because creosote has that dead zone around it, and where there might be a few feet or so in between one creosote to the other, that it doesn't promote the spread of the fire. It allows one bush to burn, but nothing else to be burned around it because there's nothing to fuel the fire. However, with invasive species coming into our deserts, it may increase grasses that are around in these areas and may make more for fierce and more frequent fires. So that's always the case in our desert habitat, but for now our creosote bush is doing fairly well in our desert. But that brings me to what's not doing well in our desert currently is the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. So I'm going to just mention this one more time. The Desert National Wildlife Refuge is the largest refuge in the lower 48 states. It holds a refuge for at least 53 species of mammals, 30 species of reptiles, and over 250 species of birds. Many threatened, sensitive, endangered species like the desert tortoise, the desert bighorn sheep, and the banded Gila monster all reside in that area and rely on it for their habitat. And right now it's under threat. So explorers, I need your help in order to get the word out. We need to protect this, make sure our senators, our congressmen, congresswomen know that we have their back, that we want to protect this land and not give it to military use. We do not want to bomb the bighorn. We want to keep bombing to its least capacity, so please don't give it to military use. We want to protect the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. So please use hashtag Don't Bomb the Bighorn, and please sign the petition that's located in the Facebook comment section. So if you sign it, please let me know. Please let us know that you have our support, and I'd really appreciate it. It should only take a minute to sign. All right, so I'm going to open it up to questions now. If anybody has any questions on our little Creosote Bush or anything about the Desert National Wildlife Refuge or the movement that we're promoting today, please let me know. I'm opening to questions right now. And it looks like we have a couple already. Will the creosote continue expanding its kingdom in the future due to climate change? That's a really good question because you can already see evidence of this in the community forest or the community desert. So creosote dominates the entire area. They pretty much live and breathe in the desert, and they suck away all the desert. They suck away all the water in their environment. So if conditions like climate change continue and fire severity is continued and these stands of creosote bushes start to burn off, they have no way of reestablishing. There's no a way for water to be returned to these resources. There's no way for the seeds to emerge on these dry, sandy soils with no water. Fire, as I mentioned, is a huge risk for them because they are very flammable. And climate change definitely will encourage the more frequent fires, the encourage of endangered species or invasive species coming in. As you can see in this video in the background, there's grasses in between the creosote. So those grasses will catch fire and spread it to the nearby creosote bushes. So climate change definitely will have effect on the creosote. Who's to say that they won't be able to recover from these numbers, but because of the way that they are no way near prepared for fire adaptation, I could see that being a problem in the future. Is the high school named after the herb name of the creosote? I'm assuming you mean Chaparral High School. I have no idea. I could definitely look into that. I'm assuming most people who refer to Chaparral, it usually refers to the area in California. There's a region in the California rangeland that is called Chaparral. It's known for having a very characteristic habitat, and I think most people associate that then the medicinal herb of creosote. So that's going to be my guess, but I will look into that. What kind of animals have been seen to eat the pods? Lots of desert rodents. Rodents are pretty frequent eaters of the creosote bush. They love to use it as shade, like bush rats, for instance. There are a few reptiles that may partake in it, but mostly just rodents, and a couple of like the pronghorns will eat creosote readily. I don't know if they will eat the pods directly, but they will eat the plant itself. Most of the creosote is actually unpalpable to many animals. The resin, it's very harsh. The odor, creosote is known for having a very weird odor. To us, it kind of smells like rain, but to a lot of animals, it makes it undesirable and unable to eat. So a lot of livestock won't eat creosote, which is good. So they're staying around. But a lot of other ungulates or different types of horned animals will not eat it as well. But pronghorn is one of them that will eat it. All right, I think that's all the questions I have right now. If I didn't get to your question or you have a question after this presentation, please let me know. I could definitely get back to you later and give you that information. But until then, please sign our petition to protect the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. Action is definitely needed from our volunteers, and doing wildlife protection goes more than just listening to this presentation. We definitely rely on action and political movements to get things done. So if you can just sign the petition really quickly in the comment section, that would be great. And in the spirit of don't bomb the bighorn, our next species is going to be the bighorn sheep. So next week you'll learn all about our desert bighorn sheep, which is a Nevada state mammal. Great little guys, and then of course we will still be promoting the hashtag don't bomb the bighorn movement. So please add the hashtag to any of your comments. I'd really appreciate that. There usually is an activity that we do for the week to prepare for our next animal, but this week's activity is to sign the petition. So I will be posting that in the events page, and as well as it's in the comment section. So please get the word out about don't bomb the bighorn. But until then, as always, Native Nevada Nature premieres every Wednesday at 5 p.m. right here on Facebook Live at our Nevada Conservation League page. It's a weekly spotlight to mention any native plant or animal species for the week. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please give us a like or a comment if you love this presentation. Share it out to family and friends that might enjoy it so that we can continue to do this. And until next time, keep on exploring.